The sun had just begun to set over the remote Filipino village, nestled at the edge of a thick forest. A breeze rustled through the trees, but the silence in the air felt unnatural, almost too still for a village so close to nature. The villagers moved about their evening routines, preparing meals and lighting lanterns, casting flickering shadows across their weathered homes. This was a quiet place, one where secrets were as deep and as old as the mountains surrounding them. And yet, despite the peace of the village, an unfamiliar presence had come to disturb it. It started with a strange figure appearing at the village gates, a foreign man, tall and gaunt, dressed in tattered clothes, his face bloodied and bruised. The villagers could tell at once he was an outsider. He spoke no local dialect, and his clothes seemed out of place for someone who would wander into such a remote part of the world. His face, though battered, showed no sign of fear. It was almost as if he had expected to be here, somewhere, somehow. He stumbled forward on shaky legs, his breath ragged and heavy, but his eyes were intense, focused as though he had a single goal in mind. No one dared to approach him at first. He looked like he had come from some dark place, someone who had walked through fire and had barely made it out alive. He was dangerous, the villagers thought, and they instinctively kept their distance. But in the end, it was a kind soul that broke the silence. It was the family of Mateo and Maria. He, a strong and well-respected man in the village, she, his loving and wise wife, who first offered the stranger a place to stay. Mateo had seen the foreigner collapse near the forest's edge. His heart, though cautious, felt a pang of sympathy for the man. "He's in no shape to be left out here alone," he muttered to his wife. Maria, though wary, nodded. Their home, a humble abode made from wooden planks and palm fronds, was always open to travelers in need. With a few efforts, they managed to help him inside. His name, as he weakly muttered between gasps of breath, was Elias. They asked him where he had come from, but Elias only shook his head. He couldn't explain it, he said. He had been chasing something dark and powerful, across the world, and now, after what seemed like an eternity of travel, he had found himself here. The Aswangs, he called them. The word sounded strange to the couple. "What's that?" Mateo had asked, his brow furrowed, but Elias only closed his eyes. "You wouldn't understand. None of you would." Despite their confusion, they made him comfortable and offered him food and water. Maria noticed the man's strange aura as he ate, his eyes constantly darting toward the windows, scanning the room for something unseen. There was a nervous energy about him, a tension that Maria couldn't place. She offered him a room for the night, and he accepted, muttering thanks before retreating to the dimly lit space. As night descended upon the village, the air grew heavy with a strange chill, though the heat of the day was still palpable. The family sat together in the main room, exchanging quiet conversation as they watched the flickering flames of the lanterns dance in the corner. But all was not well. It was when the full moon rose high in the sky that Maria heard it, the unmistakable sound of someone whispering. At first, she thought it was the wind, but the whispering grew louder, more insistent. She rose from her seat and walked toward the back of the house, where the foreigner had been given his room. She opened the door slowly, her heart pounding, and saw Elias standing by the window. His back was to her, and he was staring out into the night with an expression of deep concentration. "Elias," Maria called softly. "Are you all right?" The man didn't move at first, his eyes fixed on something beyond the house, something out in the darkened woods. His lips moved silently, as though speaking to someone only he could see. Then, with a sudden sharp movement, he turned to her, His eyes were wild, wide with fear, yet they carried an intense determination. "I have to do it," he whispered hoarsely, "before it's too late, before it's already here." Maria recoiled, a cold shiver running down her spine. There was something wrong with him, something deeper than exhaustion or injury. He was speaking in riddles, but his tone was too urgent, too frantic. "Do what, Elias?" she asked, her voice trembling. But he was already moving toward the door. His steps were hurried and unsteady, like a man possessed by a force he could no longer control. "I'm sorry," he muttered, almost to himself. "I never wanted to do this, but it's the only way to stop them." Maria tried to reach for him, but he was already out of the house, slipping into the night like a shadow. Panic rose in her chest. "Elias," she called, "come back." But the man didn't stop. He vanished into the darkness, disappearing into the night. Maria rushed back to the main room, her heart pounding in her chest. Mateo was already standing by the door, concern etched across his face. "What's going on?" he asked. "I don't know," Maria breathed, fear creeping into her voice. He's not right. There's something wrong with him." The wind howled outside, sending a chill through the house. And so, the mystery began. The strange visitor, the foreigner who had come into their lives with such an ominous presence, had already started to unravel the threads of the family's carefully guarded secret. His arrival was no coincidence, and as the night unfolded, it became clear to Maria and Mateo that their lives, along with their very existence, were about to change forever. The village was not a place accustomed to outside visitors. It was quiet, isolated, and self-sustaining, with generations of families living in harmony, bound by shared traditions and an unspoken understanding of the dangers that lurked in the surrounding forests. For centuries, the village had remained untouched by the outside world, with its people living their lives in relative peace. But the arrival of Elias had shattered that tranquility, and Maria could feel it deep in her bones. Something sinister had been set in motion. Mateo and Maria stayed awake that night, their thoughts racing as they sat in the dim glow of the lantern. The wind outside had picked up, howling through the trees with a ferocity that seemed unnatural. The quiet hum of the village, usually so soothing, was now laced with an uneasy tension. Something was coming, and it wasn't just Elias's strange behavior. It was something much older, something far more dangerous. The next morning, the village woke up to the strange silence that followed a storm. It wasn't the usual morning calm after a windy night. The air felt still and thick, as though even nature itself was holding its breath. Mateo, ever the protector, insisted that they go searching for Elias. His disappearance had been troubling, and he was sure that the foreigner was up to something dangerous. But Maria, despite her own fears, had a feeling that Elias's actions were not just the result of a wandering mind. She had heard him mention the word Aswang, and in her heart, she feared that whatever Elias had been chasing might have followed him here. The village elder, an old woman named Lola Clara, was the first to offer insight. Maria and Mateo visited her humble home, an ancient structure made of stone and wood, where the scent of herbs and incense filled the air. Lola Clara, though frail with age, carried the weight of the village's history and its most closely guarded secrets. "You've seen it, haven't you?" Lola Clara asked Maria the moment she entered, her sharp eyes locking onto Maria's. Maria's heart skipped a beat. "Seen what?" "The foreigner," the elder said softly. "The one you call Elias. He is not just a traveler. He is a hunter." "A hunter?" Mateo echoed. "A hunter of what?" Lola Clara hesitated for a moment before answering. "The Aswang," she whispered. "The creature of night, the spirit of darkness. It has haunted our village for centuries." Maria felt the weight of the words settle on her chest. The Aswangs were no mere legends. They were real as the air they breathed. Her grandmother had told her stories of them when she was a child, of creatures that lived in the shadows, feeding on the souls of the living. And now, she realized, the threat was no longer just a story. It had arrived. "The Aswangs are cursed beings," Lola Clara continued, her voice growing softer. "They were once humans, but they were corrupted by a dark force, an evil that turned them into monsters. Over time, they've adapted, learning to blend in with the people they once were. But they are still the same, hungry, relentless, and merciless." Maria felt a chill run down her spine. "But why is Elias hunting them?" she asked, trying to make sense of it all. Lola Clara paused. "Because Elias is not like the others. He is not of this place. He has come here seeking revenge on the very creatures he believes destroyed his family." Elias's voice echoed in Maria's mind, the words he had muttered the night before. "Before it's already here." It all made sense now. Elias wasn't just some lost traveler. He was a man driven by vengeance, a man who had been chasing a nightmare across the world. And now, that nightmare had followed him here. "What can we do?" Mateo asked, his voice filled with urgency. "How do we stop them?" The elder looked at them both with grave eyes. "You cannot stop them. The Aswangs are not something you can fight with swords or fire. They are creatures of the dark, born from the very essence of evil. To defeat them, you must understand them. You must uncover their weakness." "How do we do that?" Maria asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lola Clara leaned in closer, her eyes narrowing with intensity. "The key to defeating the Aswangs lies within the bloodline. The curse is passed down through generations. If you can uncover the true source of the curse, if you can break it, then you can destroy them. But be warned, the Aswangs will stop at nothing to protect their secret. They will kill anyone who gets too close." The weight of the elder's words hung in the air like a dark cloud. Maria and Mateo exchanged uneasy glances, the gravity of the situation sinking in. There was no turning back now. The search for Elias became a desperate race against time. The village was no longer safe, not with the Aswangs lurking in the shadows, and not with Elias hunting them. The forest, once a peaceful place, had become a labyrinth of darkness and danger. It was a place where creatures stalked the night, where nightmares came to life. And it was within that very forest that the answers they needed lay. But as Maria and Mateo prepared to venture into the depths of the forest, they could feel the pull of something darker than they had ever imagined. The Aswangs had already set their sights on the village, and their hunger for blood would not be sated until they had claimed what they came for. As they stepped into the forest, the air grew colder. The trees seemed to close in around them, their branches twisting like skeletal hands, reaching out to grab hold of them. It felt as if the very earth beneath their feet was alive, a living, breathing entity that was watching their every move. The quiet was deafening, the only sound the crunch of leaves beneath their feet. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the darkness became, until it felt like the night itself was closing in on them. And then, through the stillness, they heard it, a low, guttural growl. It was coming from ahead, and they weren't alone. The growl that echoed through the forest was not the sound of any animal Maria or Mateo had ever encountered. It was deep, almost human, yet distinctly inhuman. The hairs on Maria's neck stood on end as she exchanged a glance with Mateo. He looked just as unnerved as she felt, but there was no turning back now. They had come too far, and the truth was within their reach. "Stay close," Mateo whispered, his voice barely audible above the wind rustling through the trees. His hand gripped the machete he had brought along, the blade glinting faintly in the dim light. Maria nodded, clutching her own knife, though she knew it would be useless against whatever they were facing. As they pressed forward, the growls grew louder, sharper, more distinct. It was clear now that the sound was no longer coming from a single source. It seemed to be coming from all around them, the darkness itself alive with the presence of something malevolent, something that was watching them, stalking them. And then, as if summoned by their fear, the Aswangs revealed themselves. The first one emerged from the shadows like a wraith, its form a grotesque distortion of human features. Its skin was ashen, stretched tightly over bones that seemed too large for its frame. The eyes glowed a sickly yellow, and its mouth opened wide, revealing rows of sharp, jagged teeth. It didn't move like a man. It slithered, its limbs bending in unnatural ways, as if it were crawling on all fours despite standing upright. Maria froze, her heart pounding in her chest. This was no mere legend. The creature before her was real, and it was terrifying. "Run!" Mateo shouted, grabbing her arm and pulling her forward. They sprinted through the forest, branches whipping against their skin, their breath coming in ragged gasps. The Aswangs were close behind, their growls echoing like a chorus of death, each sound growing louder with every passing second. It felt as if the night itself was closing in, suffocating them. Just as Maria thought they might outrun their pursuers, she stumbled over a root and fell to the ground. The pain shot through her leg, but there was no time to stop. She scrambled to her feet, but as she did, a hand, no, a claw, gripped her ankle, pulling her back toward the darkness. "Maria!" Mateo's voice echoed through the trees as he reached out to her. The Aswang's grip was like iron, its claws digging into her skin. Maria kicked and screamed, but the creature's strength was overwhelming. She could feel its hot, fetid breath on her skin, and she knew, without a doubt, that if it caught her, it would be the end. Suddenly, the Aswang was ripped away from her, its shrill screech filling the night air. Maria scrambled backward, her heart racing as she looked up to see Mateo standing between her and the creature. He swung his machete with all his strength, slashing at the Aswang's face. The creature hissed in pain, its yellow eyes narrowing with fury. It swiped at Mateo with a speed that was almost too fast to follow. He staggered back, narrowly avoiding the razor-sharp claws that came down at him. Maria's hands trembled as she reached for her knife, but before she could move, a second Aswang appeared from the shadows, its eyes locking onto her. This one was different. It was larger, its body more muscular, and its movements more calculated. It was a predator, and Maria was its prey. Mateo's voice rang out in desperation. "Maria, go! Run!" She hesitated for a moment, but then the creature lunged at her. Instinctively, she turned and bolted, her heart pounding in her ears. The Aswang was right behind her, its growls vibrating through the air like thunder. She could hear it getting closer, its breath hot on her neck, the sound of its claws scraping against the ground. There was no escape. The trees around her blurred as she ran, her legs burning, but she knew that if she stopped, it would be over. Suddenly, she heard a sharp crack, a branch breaking. The Aswang behind her screamed, a horrifying screech that echoed through the forest. Maria dared to glance over her shoulder and saw the creature stumbling, momentarily distracted by something in the trees. It was as if the forest itself was fighting back. A voice, low and calm, came from ahead. This way. Maria didn't hesitate. She ran toward the voice, pushing through the thick underbrush until she stumbled into a clearing. Standing there, his eyes glowing with a faint, unnatural light, was Elias. "Stay close to me," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "The forest is alive with them, but I know how to keep them at bay." Mateo caught up to her, his breath ragged, his face pale. He stared at Elias in disbelief. You knew?" Elias nodded, his expression grim. "I've been hunting them for years, but it's not just about killing them. It's about breaking the curse that has tied them to this place for centuries." Maria's mind raced. "How do we break it?" she asked, her voice hoarse from fear. Elias's eyes darkened. "The curse runs deep in this land. It's tied to the blood of the villagers, to the very soil beneath our feet. If we can find the heart of it, the source, we can destroy the Aswangs once and for all. But it won't be easy. We'll need to sacrifice something to destroy them." "Sacrifice?" Mateo echoed, his face filled with confusion. Elias's gaze turned cold. "Yes, there is always a price. A life for a life." Maria felt the weight of his words sink in. This wasn't just about survival. It was about something much darker, something ancient. The Aswangs weren't just creatures of the night. They were part of a cycle, a curse that could only be broken by blood. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. "Where do we start?" Elias's eyes flickered toward the dense forest ahead. "We find the heart of the curse, and we end it before they find us first." The clearing they stood in was eerily silent, save for the faint rustling of leaves in the wind. The moon hung low in the sky, casting pale light over the group. Maria's breath was still ragged from the chase, and she could feel the sharp sting of fear and exhaustion in her chest. But there was no time to rest. Not yet. Elias motioned for them to follow, and without a word, they began walking again. The forest around them seemed alive, each twisted tree and shadowy nook hiding its own secrets. The air felt thicker here, as if the land itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. "Do you know where we're going?" Mateo asked, his voice laced with skepticism. He was still clutching his machete, but Maria could see the doubt in his eyes. They had barely escaped the Aswangs, and now they were walking deeper into the forest, trusting a man they barely knew. Elias didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced back at them, his face unreadable in the moonlight. "I know where the curse lies. It's an old place, buried beneath the earth. But it will take more than just finding it. We'll need to destroy the source before the Aswangs can stop us." Maria could sense the weight of his words, but she didn't dare ask more. It was clear Elias was carrying burdens of his own, things he wasn't yet ready to share. And truthfully, she didn't know if she wanted to know. Every step forward was a step deeper into unknown danger, and yet she couldn't turn back now. Too many lives, too many people, were depending on them. They traveled for what felt like hours, the dense forest stretching on endlessly before them. The only sounds were their footsteps and the occasional snap of twigs underfoot. Maria was growing more and more restless with each step, her mind racing with questions. Who had cursed this land? Why? And most urgently, how could they stop it? Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Elias stopped at the edge of a darkened ravine. The earth here was cracked and jagged, the ground lined with gnarled roots and blackened stones. The air was thick with an unnatural stillness. The Aswang's growls had quieted down, but Maria could feel their presence, lurking just beyond the trees, waiting for their next move. "This is it." Elias said quietly. The heart of the curse lies beneath us, but we cannot simply dig and hope to find it. The land here is alive with dark magic, and it will not let us take what it has claimed. Maria looked at the ground beneath them. She could almost feel the pulse of the land beneath her feet, like a slow, throbbing heartbeat. She shivered. "What do we do?" Mateo asked, his voice edged with fear. "How do we destroy it?" Elias turned to face them, his expression serious. There is an ancient ritual, passed down through generations. It involves drawing the curse into a single point, then offering a sacrifice to break the bond. But there is one catch. Maria's heart skipped a beat. What catch? Elias's eyes narrowed. The sacrifice must be someone tied to the land, someone with blood that runs through the veins of those who originally brought the curse. And the land will demand that blood in exchange. For a moment, Maria didn't understand. So, you mean someone has to die? Yes, Elias replied solemnly, but not just anyone. It has to be a descendant of those who cursed the land, the bloodline that brought the Aswangs into being. A blood price must be paid. Maria's mind spun as she tried to process what Elias was saying. It seemed like madness, a life for a life, but not just any life, someone directly tied to the curse. But the implications were worse than that. Does that mean one of us? Maria began, but she couldn't bring herself to finish the sentence. It was unthinkable. Elias's gaze softened, but only slightly. I'm afraid so. The land will choose. It always does. Maria felt a chill run down her spine. What if none of us is connected to the curse? She asked, her voice trembling. Elias was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the dark ravine before them. Finally, he spoke. Then the curse will never end, and the Aswangs will continue to hunt. The weight of those words settled on her like a heavy blanket. Maria's thoughts raced. She looked at Mateo, but his face mirrored the same fear that she felt. Neither of them knew how to move forward from this. We have no choice, Mateo said, his voice strained but resolute. We came this far. If this is the only way to stop them, then we have to do it. But, he faltered, what if the blood needed to break the curse isn't even here anymore? Elias turned toward them, his eyes reflecting the dim light of the moon. There is one more thing you should know. The curse has spread, yes, but it started with the ancestors of this village. Their bloodline has been twisted over generations. It's still here, and it's still active. Maria's heart sank as she realized what Elias was hinting at. The curse wasn't just some old story. It was tied to her, too. You mean? Her voice trailed off. You mean I might be the one? Elias nodded, his expression grim. I can't say for certain, but if you are the one, you'll feel it when we start the ritual. The land will call to you. You will know if it's you who must pay the price. Maria felt dizzy. Her knees nearly buckled as the gravity of Elias's words took hold. How could she sacrifice herself? What choice did she have? And yet, if it wasn't her, who else could it be? I'll do it, Mateo said suddenly, his voice firm. I'll make the sacrifice. I'm not going to let Maria go through with it. Maria turned to him, her heart pounding. No, Mateo, you can't. But Mateo's expression was set in determination. You don't have to carry this burden, Maria. If anyone should be the one to end this, it's me. I won't let you sacrifice yourself. Elias stepped forward, placing a hand on Mateo's shoulder. It's not up to us, Mateo. It's up to the land. If you are not the one tied to the curse, then the ritual won't work. But if it is Maria... He let the sentence hang in the air, unfinished. Maria's chest tightened. It was a choice that could cost them everything. the very life of someone they loved. "Let's proceed," Elias said finally, his voice low. "The ritual must begin before the Aswang's return. We don't have much time." Maria nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. There was no turning back now. Whatever was to come, they would face it together. The air around them grew heavier as they stood at the edge of the ravine, surrounded by the dark expanse of the forest. The moonlight now felt like an oppressive force, shining down on them as though the heavens themselves were watching, waiting for what was to come. The earth seemed to hum under their feet, as if it was alive, and Maria could feel it in the pit of her stomach, a dark energy that was both ancient and malevolent. Elias, who had been standing motionless for several moments, broke the silence. His voice was low, almost reverent. "The ritual must be done at the heart of the curse. We must begin before the Aswang's return, or we will be trapped here, with no hope of escape." Maria's hands trembled as she reached out to touch the rough bark of a nearby tree. The land felt different here, as if it was pulling at her very soul. It was as though she were being drawn into something far greater than herself, something she couldn't yet understand. "How do we begin?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her throat was dry, and she could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her. This was no longer just about survival. It was about breaking the chains of a curse that had plagued this land for centuries. Elias didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked to the edge of the ravine, his footsteps soft on the cracked earth. "First, we need to draw the energy of the curse into a single point," he said. "The earth is connected to the curse, but we must pull it out, make it vulnerable. Only then can we destroy it." He pulled out a small weathered dagger from his belt and knelt beside a jagged stone. Maria and Mateo exchanged nervous glances, but neither of them spoke. Elias was focused, his eyes locked on the blade in his hand as he began to carve strange symbols into the stone. The marks glowed faintly, like fireflies trapped beneath the surface of the stone. "What are you doing?" Mateo asked, his voice thick with apprehension. Elias didn't look up. "This is how we channel the energy. The symbols are part of the ritual. They'll bind the curse, give it a form we can destroy." Maria stepped closer, watching the symbols take shape. The more Elias worked, the more she felt an inexplicable pull. The land seemed to tremble beneath them, as though it were awakening, stretching and shifting in response to the ancient marks being etched into its skin. Suddenly, a cold wind whipped through the clearing, sending leaves spiraling into the air. The shadows around them deepened, and Maria's breath caught in her throat. The Aswangs were near. "We don't have much time," Elias muttered, his voice grim. "Prepare yourselves." Maria's heart raced. The Aswangs could smell their fear. They could feel the pulse of the curse, and they would not let it go easily. She glanced at Mateo, who was already gripping his machete tightly, his knuckles white from the pressure. He looked at her, his expression determined, but pained. "Whatever happens, Maria, you must stay focused," he said, his voice low. "You cannot let the fear take over. If you do, the curse will consume you." Maria nodded, swallowing hard. She had no choice. This was the only way. But the weight of the decision pressed on her chest like 1,000 tons. She could feel the land calling to her, urging her to step forward, but the fear gnawing at her insides made it hard to move. "Now," Elias commanded, "it's time to complete the ritual." Without further warning, Elias placed his hand on the stone. The symbols flared to life, glowing brighter, pulsing with an eerie, unnatural light. Maria could feel the ground beneath her feet tremble, as the energy of the curse was drawn into the center of the ravine, forming a swirling vortex of dark magic. The wind picked up again, howling through the trees as the shadows around them shifted. Maria's heart pounded in her chest as the ground beneath her shook violently. She could feel the presence of the Aswangs now, their hunger palpable, but they weren't yet close enough to attack. Not yet. "This is it," Elias said, his voice strained. "The curse is almost here. Prepare yourselves." Maria stepped forward, the air around her growing colder with every step. She could feel the pull of the curse, as though it were a living thing, trying to reach out and claim her. She had to be strong. She had to do that. But then, something unexpected happened. A voice, soft and haunting, reached her ears. It was faint at first, barely a whisper on the wind, but it grew louder with each passing second. "Maria." She froze. The voice called her name again, and this time, it was unmistakable. She looked around, but there was no one there. The sound of her name seemed to echo from all directions at once, reverberating off the trees, the stones, the very earth beneath her feet. "Maria, you are the one." Maria's blood ran cold as the words sank in. It was her. She was the one the land had chosen. She was the sacrifice. "No!" she shouted, her voice rising in panic. She stepped back, stumbling over her own feet, but the voice continued, more insistent now, more commanding. "You must offer yourself. Only then can the curse be broken." Maria's head spun. She looked at Elias, her eyes wild with fear. "I can't do this," she cried, the tears welling up in her eyes. "I can't." Elias stepped forward, his hand on her shoulder. His expression was solemn, but there was a quiet understanding in his eyes. "The land has chosen Maria. You must face it. There is no other way." Maria opened her mouth to argue, but no words came. The presence of the curse was overwhelming, suffocating her, pushing her toward the edge of the ravine. The land's voice, echoing in her mind, was unrelenting, filling her head with visions of the past. The bloodshed, the terror, the lives lost. The Aswangs were close now, their growls growing louder, but they could not approach yet. They were bound by the ritual, but Maria wasn't sure how much longer they would be held at bay. With a strangled sob, Maria turned toward the center of the ravine, where the vortex of darkness swirled like a black hole, consuming everything in its path. She knew what she had to do. The land was demanding it, and there was no escape from what was about to happen. The darkness in the ravine pulsed like a living heart, beating in sync with Maria's rapid breathing. Her footsteps were uncertain, hesitant, as she inched closer to the swirling vortex at the center of the ancient stone. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the land itself resisted her movement, not to stop her, but to test her resolve. The whispers had grown louder now, no longer soft murmurs but layered voices, dozens, maybe hundreds, all calling her name. Behind her, Elias and Mateo watched in tense silence. Elias held the dagger in one hand and a small bowl carved from bone in the other. Mateo had his machete gripped tightly, eyes never straying from the tree line where the shadows twisted unnaturally. The Aswangs were nearing. Their snarls echoed faintly in the wind, a cruel reminder that their time was slipping away. "Maria," Elias said, stepping closer but careful not to break the circle carved into the earth. "This next step is the most dangerous. It will open the final gate. Once the blood touches the stone, the curse will awaken fully." "What happens to me?" she asked, her voice trembling. Elias looked at her, the silence hanging like a blade between them. "You become the offering, but not in the way the curse expects." Her brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" The land believes it needs to devour you to end this. But you are not here to be consumed. You are here to bind the bloodline, to reclaim it. This ritual will force the curse to take shape. Once it does, we can destroy it. Maria didn't fully understand, but she nodded. She had come too far to turn back now. Elias handed her the dagger. "It must be your blood," he said. "The curse is tied to your lineage. Only you can summon its true form." Maria took the dagger, her hands shaking as the cold metal touched her skin. She glanced at the vortex. The wind was howling now, whipping her hair around her face, and the earth beneath her feet cracked and trembled. The ancient symbols Elias had carved began to glow fiercely, casting a reddish hue across her face. Slowly, deliberately, Maria raised the dagger and dragged the blade across her palm. Pain bloomed instantly, sharp and blinding, but she gritted her teeth and held steady. Blood trickled down her hand, thick and warm, and she stepped forward, letting it drip into the center of the stone. The reaction was immediate. A deafening roar burst from the earth, like 1,000 voices screaming at once. The ground split with a crack, and the swirling darkness surged upward, forming into a towering figure of smoke and shadow. Its shape was monstrous, part human, part beast, with wings of ragged bone and eyes that glowed with a fiery hatred. The curse had manifested. Mateo staggered back, eyes wide with horror. "What is that?" "The spirit of the curse," Elias said grimly. "The Aswang who started it all." Maria's knees buckled at the sight of the beast. It stood nearly 10 feet tall, with elongated arms ending in claws like scythes. Its mouth opened, revealing rows of jagged teeth, and it let out a gut. "You're not supposed to fight it," Elias said, stepping forward and placing the bone bowl on the ground, beside the blood-soaked stone. "You're supposed to trap it. But how? You bind it with your will, your name, your blood. That is what the curse fears most, being remembered for what it truly is." The beast lunged suddenly, and Maria flinched, but it hit an invisible wall. The symbols Elias had carved pulsed with light, holding the creature at bay for the moment. It roared in frustration, clawing at the air, its eyes fixed on Maria. "You carry the blood of the first betrayal," it hissed, its voice a foul wind in her ears. "You are the chain that binds me. Break, and I am free." Maria stood tall, though her body trembled with fear. "I won't break." She knelt beside the stone, blood still dripping from her hand, and began to speak words Elias had taught her earlier. Ancient, forgotten phrases that connected her to the land, to her ancestors, to the story of the curse itself. The wind stopped. The trees went silent. Even the snarls of the approaching Aswangs faded into nothing. The creature reeled back, its form flickering like firelight. "Stop!" it screamed. "You do not know what you invoke." Maria ignored it. Her voice grew louder, more certain, as she repeated the chant. The symbols around the stone glowed so brightly that Elias had to shield his eyes. The ground opened in a jagged crack beneath the beast, and chains of light erupted from the earth, wrapping around its limbs, its torso, its throat. It struggled violently, shrieking with a sound that tore into their bones, but it could not break free. The ritual was working. Suddenly, the trees around them exploded into motion. The Aswangs had arrived. They burst from the shadows, grotesque, malformed figures with glowing eyes and twisted limbs. Mateo sprang into action, slashing with his machete, holding them back from the circle as best he could. "Finish it, Maria," he shouted. "We can't hold them forever." Maria raised her bleeding hand again and placed it over the bone bowl. The blood inside had started to shimmer, turning a deep, unnatural black. With a final word, she poured the contents over the stone. The moment the blood touched the stone, A shockwave of energy erupted from the center of the circle. The chains binding the curse tightened, pulling the beast downward. It howled in rage and agony, clawing at the air as it was dragged into the earth. "I will return," it screamed. "You cannot hold me forever." With a final flash of light, the creature vanished into the stone. The ravine went still. The wind died. The trees ceased their trembling. Silence fell. The Aswangs, sensing their master's defeat, let out a series of terrified shrieks and scattered into the forest. Some dissolved into smoke. Others stumbled and fell, their bodies reverting to human forms, cursed souls finally freed. Mateo collapsed to his knees, breathing heavily, his blade dripping with dark blood. Elias stared at the stone, now cracked and inert. Maria swayed where she stood, exhausted. Her hand throbbed, her body weak from blood loss and the effort of the ritual. But it was done. The curse was sealed, for now. The silence that followed the sealing of the curse felt almost unnatural, thick, heavy, pressing down on Maria like a shroud. The eerie quiet wasn't peace, it was aftermath. Smoke curled from the scorched symbols in the soil. The ravine, once alive with whispers and darkness, now lay dormant. Yet beneath that stillness, Maria could feel something, faint but pulsing. The curse was bound, but it was not gone, not entirely. Elias was the first to speak, his voice raspy from chanting and effort. "It worked. We forced it back, but something feels off." Maria looked at him, dazed, blood still drying on her palm. "What do you mean?" It yielded too easily. He knelt beside the cracked stone and brushed aside the soot. The curse gave itself up, but not all of it. It left something behind. Mateo, still catching his breath, with blood spattered across his shirt and face, let out a low groan. "You mean we just fought all that for nothing?" "No," Elias replied. "We weakened it. We changed its form. But something deeper is buried in your bloodline, Maria. This was only the mask." Maria blinked, stunned. "The mask?" Elias nodded grimly. "Curses evolve. They adapt when they sense they're losing. This one didn't just haunt your family. It lived through them. It's been rewriting its story every generation, hiding its roots. Now it's clinging to whatever remains. And we need to find out what that is." For the first time since the ritual, Maria's legs gave out. She sat heavily on the damp ground, exhaustion catching up with her. Her hand throbbed, her head pounded, and her heart was full of dread. She had stared into the face of the curse, and it had smiled back. "Where do we start?" she whispered. Elias looked up at her, his eyes hard. "With your fae." That night, the three of them returned to Maria's home. It felt different now, colder. The air carried a scent of dust and secrets. Her aunt's old journals were piled on the floor where she had left them weeks ago, untouched. But now, Maria saw them not as relics of madness, but as clues, as warnings. Elias lit a candle, its flickering glow dancing across the yellowed pages. He handed Maria one journal after another while he thumbed through old maps, family trees, and sketches of ancient symbols. "I need you to read aloud anything strange," he said. "Anything about dreams, whispers, disappearances, even old superstitions." Maria opened a worn book, bound with twine. The writing inside was messy, scrawled with urgency. It was her great-grandmother's. "They call me mad. They laugh when I say the night listens, but I know it does. The eyes in the tree line never blink. The shadow that brushes my bed is not wind. They think I cursed them, but I only fed the curse to sleep. My child must never speak the old name." Maria paused. "Old name? What old name?" Elias turned to her sharply. "Keep reading." I burned the birth scrolls, the church records too. I told Father Ignacio the child was born under a storm, not a blood moon. I lied to God to protect the bloodline, but lies rot, and the rot is returning." The pages stopped abruptly. The rest of the journal was blank, as if her great-grandmother had been cut off mid-thought. Maria shivered. She knew. Maria whispered. She knew something, and she tried to erase it. Elias stood up and rummaged through the old chest in the corner of the room. He pulled out an old folded parchment, weathered, brittle, but intact. It was a hand-drawn family tree, incomplete and fragmented, with many names scratched out. "This is it," he said. She tried to burn the past, but fragments remain. "Look." He pointed at a name at the very top, barely legible. Lucila de Santoya. Maria frowned. "I've never heard that name." "You wouldn't." She was erased. But look below her. This entire branch of your bloodline was cut out. That's not a mistake. That's an attempt to hide. Elias traced the line with his finger. This woman, Lucila, was the first to carry the curse. Not the Aswang you faced. That was just a shadow of her. She is the origin. Mateo crossed his arms. "So what? She summoned the curse?" "No," Elias said, his voice low. "She made it." Maria felt her skin go cold. "You mean she wasn't cursed? She created the curse?" Elias nodded. "There was a war hundreds of years ago. Invaders, outsiders who brought violence and ruin. Lucila was a midwife in a forest village. After watching her entire family slaughtered, she turned to forbidden rites. She didn't want vengeance. She wanted control. And she forged something from blood and sorrow and rage. That thing you sealed tonight, it was her echo." "But why does it follow my family?" "Because she sealed part of herself into her bloodline. She passed it on. And your ancestors spent centuries trying to suppress her, lying to the church, changing names, burning records. But they never truly erased her. The curse sleeps, but her soul survives. And now it's waking." Maria leaned back, stunned. "So all of this, started with her. She created the curse that destroyed generations of my family. And it gets worse," Elias said, holding up another page, an old drawing of a woman surrounded by ravens and children with black eyes. Lucila made a pact. Her curse wasn't just a spell, it was a bargain, with something older. Mateo stepped closer. "Older than the curse?" "Yes. The forest spirits, the ones that watch from behind the trees. The Aswangs are only pawns. The real power, what Lucila struck a deal with, it's still out there. And it's waiting." Maria felt the weight of 1,000 years pressing down on her shoulders. She had thought that sealing the curse would bring peace. But now, it was clear. The ritual had only uncovered a deeper truth. She stood, gripping the journal tightly. "Then we find her. Whatever's left of her soul, her curse, her lies, we finish it. No more running." Elias gave a grim smile. "Then we return to the forest." Mateo groaned. "Back there, after everything?" "There's something buried beneath the roots," Elias said. "A second altar, a secret chamber, the final piece of the story, and Lucila's spirit is waiting for us." Outside, the wind stirred again, rustling the branches in warning. The following morning broke with a strange calmness. Mist hovered low over the village, clinging to rooftops and tree branches like a warning. Maria stood by her window, watching the fog drift and curl around the trunks of the dense forest in the distance. That forest had once been a place of childhood wonder, a backdrop for games and whispered stories. Now it loomed like a gaping mouth, ready to swallow the past, the truth, and perhaps her future. Inside, Elias packed his satchel with salts, protective amulets, and pages of sacred texts. Mateo checked the machete he refused to part with and silently tucked a crucifix into his shirt. Maria didn't bring much. She only carried her great-grandmother's journal, a small lantern, and a pendant that had belonged to her mother, a piece of obsidian wrapped in twisted silver. By midday, they were standing at the forest's edge. "I thought we sealed the altar," Mateo said, his voice tight with unease. "We sealed an altar," Elias replied, narrowing his eyes. "But that was the surface, a decoy. The real chamber is deeper, hidden from those unworthy to see it." Maria nodded. Lucila never meant for it to be found. That's why she erased herself from the family records. She didn't just fear outsiders, she feared us. They stepped into the shadows. Each step forward seemed to stretch time itself. The trees whispered in unfamiliar tones. The usual rustling of birds or insects was absent. The forest was watching, aware. The deeper they went, the more unnatural the world became. Trees were twisted, growing in strange, serpentine shapes. Roots jutted out like claws from the ground, and symbols etched into the bark glowed faintly in the dim light. "This forest isn't just cursed," Elias muttered. "It's alive, touched by Lucila's magic. It grew around her pain and fed on it." Eventually they reached a small clearing. At its center stood a stone statue covered in moss and ivy, barely visible. It was a woman, tall, arms outstretched, face obscured by vines. Maria stepped closer and gasped. "It's her. Lucila." As she brushed away the vines, the stone face revealed itself, calm, regal, yet hollow-eyed. Beneath the statue's feet was a circular slab of stone, etched with familiar markings, the same ones they had seen on the altar. "There's something underneath," Elias said, kneeling down. With a bit of effort, they uncovered a hidden latch, a stone mechanism that clicked when turned. Slowly, the ground rumbled, and the slab began to sink, revealing a staircase spiraling down into darkness. No words were spoken. They descended. The air in the chamber was heavy and old. Each breath tasted of earth and mildew, tinged with copper. The walls were covered in ancient glyphs, depicting scenes too fragmented to fully understand. A woman giving birth under a red moon, villagers kneeling before a burning tree, a black-eyed child walking into fire without burning. At the chamber's center was an altar, not stone, but bone, real, ancient bone. Skulls, ribs, and spines fused together, shaped into a grotesque cradle. Within it, an orb pulsated with a faint reddish light. Maria's breath caught. "Is that—" "Yes," Elias confirmed. "That's her heart." "Her what?" Mateo stepped back, horrified. "Lucila didn't die like others. She split her essence, her soul, into pieces. One part fueled the curse, one bound itself to her bloodline. And this orb, is the core. Her wrath, her memories, her will." Maria approached the altar. Her fingers trembled as she reached out, drawn to it by some ancient tether. She was in pain, she whispered. It wasn't just vengeance. It was grief, rage. She thought she was saving us. She gave in to darkness, Elias said. And now that darkness is bleeding back into the world. Suddenly, the orb pulsed sharply. A wave of energy knocked all three backward. The chamber trembled. Glyphs on the wall lit up, and a voice, old and layered, like a chorus of dying leaves, filled the space. "You found me, daughter of my daughter, but you do not understand. You think this curse is chains. It was always a gift." Maria stumbled to her feet. "Lucila, you carry my blood. You carry my burden. I offered our family power, strength. You have seen it, tasted it." "No," Maria said, stepping forward. "I saw death. I watched my mother cry blood. I heard my cousin speak in tongues before she vanished. Your gift poisoned generations. They were weak. The curse was meant for those willing to use it, not those who feared it. Elias chanted something under his breath, holding up a talisman that sparked in protest. The orb pulsed again. Do you want the truth, Maria? I gave myself to the forest to protect our name, but I was betrayed, cast out by my village. They feared my knowledge, feared my love for something not of this world. What do you mean? Maria demanded. Something not of this world. He came to me, a foreign soul, a wanderer. He spoke in dreams, promised salvation. I loved him, and he gave me power. But they called him demon. They burned him beneath the moon and spit on his ashes. So I cursed them, all of them. Elias turned to Maria. That's the attacker, the outsider who began it all. Lucila's voice continued, more fragmented now, like breaking glass. You must choose. End me and sever the line, or take me into yourself, and we rise again. Maria's heart pounded. She stood between the altar and the curse. Yes, Elias said, but pain never really disappears. It just changes form. Maria stared into the fire, her mind drifting to Lucila's final words. You must choose. End me, or take me into yourself. I felt her, Maria said. When the orb cracked, I saw what she saw. Felt what she felt. Her heartbreak, her fury, and also her shame. She knew she went too far. She needed someone to see her, Elias said. Maria nodded. And now she can rest. The night wore on. The fire crackled. The stars above were brighter than any of them could remember. But far in the distance, past the hills and forests, past rivers and valleys, the wind stirred. In another land, another village, another family whispered its own secrets into the dark. Magic, after all, was not unique to their bloodline, and curses have a way of leaving behind echoes. The sun rose slower that morning. A heavy golden light bathed the rooftops of the village, as if the land itself had exhaled. For the first time in generations, the dawn was not met with dread, nor with the clanging of bells, warning of another possession. There was only quiet and peace. Maria stood alone at the edge of the forest, the hem of her skirt brushing against the morning dew. She held her grandmother's journal close to her chest, pages worn and ink faded. Behind her, life was beginning again. Farmers in the fields, children laughing, women hanging clothes without glancing over their shoulders. And yet, Maria's heart still bore the weight of what had been. She heard footsteps behind her. Elias joined her, his robe damp from morning mist, a wooden charm hanging around his neck. He didn't speak for a long while. You feel it too, don't you? Maria asked, her voice barely louder than the rustling leaves. Elias nodded. The forest may have released its grip, but something remains, like embers buried in ash. Maria looked down at the journal. Lucila's curse ended, but her pain, the story, it's still here, and it always will be. They walked back together in silence, passing homes now painted anew, doors wide open, windows without charms or runes. The village had changed, but it was not naive. Beneath the joy was a caution born of long memory. Mateo sat by the well, sharpening a blade out of habit more than need. When he saw them, he stood and joined them without a word. He hadn't spoken much in the days since their return. He had seen too much beneath that statue, had watched too many illusions turn into truths. But he stayed near. That was enough. Inside Maria's house, the altar room had become something else, not a place of worship, but of reflection. On the walls were hung photos, family, friends, villagers lost. A candle flickered beneath Lucila's portrait, framed not as a monster, but as a woman caught in time. A woman whose sorrow cracked the earth, but whose final breath had released generations. Maria placed the journal on a shelf beside the candle. "We can't forget," she said. "Not what she did, but also not who she was before it." Later that afternoon, a meeting was held in the village square. The elders spoke first, thanking the trio, apologizing for their blindness, and offering to lift the family's exile. Maria's name was no longer cursed. The house would no longer be feared. Her bloodline would be welcomed back into the village. But Maria surprised them all. "I will not stay," she said gently. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Mateo frowned. "What? You're leaving?" Elias asked. She nodded. "This place is healing, slowly, but I carry too much. I don't belong here anymore." Loring stepped forward from the crowd. "Where will you go, child?" Maria looked toward the horizon. "To find others. There are more families like mine, more stories lost to fear, more wounds that turned into myths. If I can help others end their curses before they begin, then Lucila's pain will not have been in vain." Silence fell. But it was not a silence of disapproval. It was of understanding. Elias looked at her with pride. "Then I will go with you." Maria smiled softly. "I hoped you would say that." Mateo shook his head and laughed. "You're both insane. You finally got peace and you're throwing it away." "No," Maria said. "We're carrying it forward." Mateo glanced around, then sighed. "Well, damn it. Someone's got to protect you fools." He sheathed his blade and stepped forward. "I'm in." That evening, the trio stood at the edge of the village once more, packs on their backs, the forest behind them, and the road before them. The villagers gathered to see them off, offering food, blessings, and flowers. As the last rays of sun touched the rooftops, Maria turned to look back. The village shimmered in the fading light. Safe. Free. But behind that freedom was a scar. A reminder of what happens when grief is buried, when stories are silenced, and when magic is left to fester. Not the monster, but the mother, the widow, the cursed, and above